so much for joining us for tonight's program. I'm very much looking forward to this one. It's Ghosts of Sleepy Hollow. Nestled on the banks of the Hudson River, Sleepy Hollow and Tarrytown are steeped in history and ghost lore. Famous for Washington Irving's The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, the storied Westchester region also has a dark history of witches, spies, and pirates. Rumors of headless horseman sightings surge during spooky season, while visitors flock to the valley's haunted hut spots like the Old Dutch Church and the famed writer's Sunnyside home. But tonight, we're joining author and journalist Sam Beltruis on a bone-chilling journey through the streets of Sleepy Hollow as he breathes new life into the legendary village's long-departed souls. And so Sam is the author of the new book, Ghosts of Sleepy Hollow, Haunts of the Headless Horseman. He has penned 18 paranormal-themed books. He has been featured on several national TV shows, including the Travel Channel's A Haunting, Most Terrifying Places, Haunted Towns, and Fright Club 1 and 2. Sam has also made a cameo in the documentary The House in Between Two, and on several additional TV programs, including The Unbelievable with Dan Aykroyd, History's Most Haunted, Paranormal Night Shift, and Forbidden History. And folks, that's just scratching the surface there. Folks, let's give a big virtual round of applause to Sam for joining us here tonight. And Sam, you can take it away. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for the introduction. This is actually my fourth lecture with Tewksbury. I'm very grateful to be back. Some of my favorite library lectures have been with your library. So again, thanks for having the series, and the people from all over the country. Ecuador, that's amazing. Okay, so we're gonna get rolling. So we had a little bit of a technical difficulty when it came to sharing the slides. Probably having like a ghost in my computer or something. It seems like when I do these virtual lectures that something always kind of happens. But we'll talk a little bit about what happened while writing my book. It's my number 18 book. It's Ghosts of Sleepy Hollow, Haunts of the Headless Horseman. Had so much fun doing the research and writing on this book. And I'm known for my book, Ghosts of Salem. Kind of do a little bit of a shout out for that. A lot of you guys know me for Ghosts of Salem and the research that I've done there. But I lived in New York City for about 9 years or so. And then I would visit Sleepy Hollow, and I noticed it was very similar to what I was picking up as far as paranormal activity and things that happened in Salem as well. So there's a kind of an interesting juxtaposition between Sleepy Hollow and Salem. So we're going to go over the basics. We're going to go to the next slide, Robert. Okay, so I'm going to pull up my screen as well so I can see what I wrote. So for those that don't know, so Washington Irving penned The Legend of Sleepy Hollow in 1820 while living in Birmingham, England. Irving's version of the Headless Horseman is set in the Hudson Valley region, and it pits an outsider, a Yankee named Ichabod Crane, against a very insular Dutch community. Ichabod pursues a local Dutch heiress in an effort to integrate himself into the community and is ultimately run out of the town by the apparition of the Headless Horseman. It's not set in Halloween as portrayed in pop culture, and the Headless Horseman didn't have a jack-o'-lantern for a head or prop, which is kind of shocking because I learned my my Legend of Sleepy Hollow, I guess pop culture, my take on it from the Disney cartoon. So a lot of us know the story, Washington Irving's famous story from that cartoon, but a lot of that was not what was based in the actual written word that he wrote in 1820. There are multiple reports of Headless Horseman sightings in Tarrytown and Sleepy Hollow. Why? I believe it's a thought form manifestation, also known as a tulpa or an egregore. It was created by telling the story over and over again. So we'll talk a little bit about what a tulpa and a thought form is as well. But I really think it's important for us to maybe go into the history and how it maybe go into like how it's different than Salem. First of all, for me personally, Salem, there's a lot of guilt associated with Salem. So there was 20 innocent people who were accused and executed for witchcraft in 1692. When I go there, give tours there, write about Salem, there's a guilt there. When I go to Sleepy Hollow, it's the complete opposite. There's something about it's like an old school Halloween feel to it. I feel excited when I go to Sleepy Hollow. Doing the research for the book, I was able to go back and forth. I live currently right outside of Salem. I live in Somerville, which is outside of Boston, and I would travel back and forth on the weekends to do the research. And I started officially doing my research on Halloween of last year. So I was doing preliminary research, but I decided to go out in the field. And you'll see a lot of my book, Ghosts of Sleepy Hollow, is going to locations and me kind of exploring it and letting the ghosts guide me while I go on my journeys in Sleepy Hollow. And so I traveled on Halloween, the night of Halloween last year. I stayed at the Terrytown House Estate, and the goal was to watch Jonathan Kruk, who is an amazing storyteller. He tells the legend of Sleepy Hollow pretty much throughout October, and at the Sunnyside, which is Washington Irving's later in life home. And I decided I stayed at the Terrytown House Estate. I look on the map, and it was a Google map, and it looked like that Sunnyside was really close to where I was staying at Terrytown House Estate. And it turns out that it's not pedestrian friendly. So I'm like, oh, I'm going to walk to Sunnyside. So I walked down to the Terrytown House Estate. If anyone's actually been there, you know that was a really bad idea. But I decided to walk it, and it became sort of like my introduction to my book, Ghost of Sleepy Hollow, that adventure that night. And it was starting to go into dusk. I was walking down the long, windy path to Sunnyside, and it gets dark. There's no pedestrian pathway, and I'm terrified. So I'm like dodging cars, trying to get down to Sunnyside. I finally make it, and I enter the back entrance, which apparently is the employees' entrance. And so I'm walking through. There's all these trees surrounding me. I'm looking around, and it's I start seeing these hooded figures like walking in the woods, and I'm like, what is going on here? And then I started hearing horses' hoofs. So kind of really creepy Halloween night for me. It turns out that I walked into a reenactment of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, and I knew I was about to go to a presentation. I didn't realize that the reenactment was surrounding me, and so I make it finally to the ticket spot, and I do go to the presentation. And I was the Jonathan Kruk's rendition of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow is a dream come true for me watching it on Halloween night. And seeing Sunnyside, again, it's Washington Irving's later in life home, seeing that as a backdrop and the Hudson River was probably one of the most magical Halloween nights that I've ever had. And I'm getting emotional just talking about it because it was so like a childhood dream come true. And I was sitting in the back row and a little scared and a little excited, and also just kind of going, what did I just experience? And what the horse's hoofs obviously was it was a reenactment, but the headless horseman does make a cameo at the very end. It's like a surprise, not to give it away if anyone's going to go, but just having that experience and kind of feeling like how Ichabod Crane felt like back, even though Ichabod Crane is actually a fictional character, an amalgam of multiple characters or people, real life people. Kind of feeling like I was put into the story. And so the introduction of Ghost of Sleepy Hollow is that adventure. And I kind of go into the idea of what is haunting Sleepy Hollow. So you can go to the next slide. And I also too by going into like what is haunting Sleepy Hollow, I had to take a deep dive into who Washington Irving was as a person. So I knew him, and I kind of put him up on the same, I guess, platform as Edgar Allan Poe and Charles Dickens. And even though he is an amazing writer, I had a sort of like misconceptions related to Washington Irving, and it kind of changed as I was writing the book and taking a deep dive into who he was as a person. So Washington Irving, he wrote, reported as seeing a lady, a lady in a white apparition in his home called Sunnyside. So he actually had a ghostly report at his home in Sunnyside. Washington Irving, for the record, was not at Sunnyside when he wrote the short story, the Legend of Sleepy Hollow. He was in Birmingham, England, and I always thought that maybe he wrote it at Sunnyside, and I thought that he lived in Sunnyside his whole life. He actually moved into the home in his life later on in life. And Washington Irving was a master brander. He was really good about kind of creating the mythologies that we know today about what was then called North Tarrytown, and has turned it into a Halloween destination just based purely on his creation of the Headless Horseman and all the other ghosts and legends that are associated with the region now, but weren't necessarily legends that were written down back in the early 1800s. Um, Irving's ghosts, and this is something that when it comes to Washington Irving and the Sunnyside, it's one of those, it's hallowed ground. So beautiful location. When it comes to the ghost of that area, he reported ghosts, and there have been reports of ghosts at that location for many, many years. However, the current the group that runs it, it's they don't talk about the ghosts, and that's very typical when it comes to historical locations. I work for the Turner Ingersoll Mansion in Salem, which is the House of Seven Gables, and they're really strange about their ghosts too. They don't want people to go and visit the location ghost hunting. They want to go because the author lived there, was inspired there, and same when it comes to Washington Irving's home. So as far as like the ghost lore associated with Sunnyside and with the property, yes, I do feel like that there's an energy on the property. I did interview Jonathan Kruk, and I asked him, like, do you think that that area is haunted, Sunnyside? And he said, yes, absolutely. But it's one of those things that it's a spirit of Washington Irving kind of psychically imprinting itself on the land and on the property. When you create, when you write, you do leave a piece of yourself at that location. So it's more about the spirit of Sleepy Hollow, the spirit of Washington Irving, and not necessarily his disembodied soul. Still there, but people have reported seeing, taking photos and seeing what appears to be a figure in the bedroom where Washington Irving passed. And there's also the woman that Washington Irving saw in his home years ago while he was living there. Apparently got a downgrade in the afterlife. So hold on, sorry about that. But downgrading after, because she's now in the apple orchard outside. So there's a lot of ghosts reported from outside of Sleepy Hollow, but it also is a location that is, I would say, there's a lot of activity when it comes to like energy that's still lingering outside there. Um, when it comes to people, several people have claimed to have encountered the Headless Horseman in the Hudson Valley region, and that's after Washington Irving wrote the book, or wrote the short story in 1820. So, Robert, are you still there? So because I got a phone call making sure it wasn't you calling and saying that it wasn't recording correctly. Are we
Sam,
good,
no,
Robert?
that wasn't me calling you. I'm still here.
Oh, good. Okay, cool. I was like, am I talking to? I'm talking to the group, but and a lot of times I'll get calls like while I'm on. It's my mother calling me. I'm like, Mom, I'm giving a lecture. You know that I'm giving a lecture, so don't call me now. But so getting back to Sunnyside, so I think that when it comes to saying that Sunnyside is haunted, I think that it's really important for us to respect the location and not going in with our paranormal devices and trying to investigate Sunnyside. Go there, take in the energy, take in the history, and you'll feel it. You'll feel Washington Irving's presence there, and you'll feel potentially the love of his life, Matilda Hoffman, who passed away when she was really young. She lived in New York City, and she's buried in the St. Mark's Cemetery. Which, by the way, when I lived in New York City, I lived right by that cemetery, so I had a lot of personal ties to this story, and I would visit Sleepy Hollow back in the 90s before it was a thing. And it was very different now going back many years later and investigating the locations associated with this famous story. But what Washington Irving did is he created, not only did he create the legend of Sleepy Hollow, in my opinion, the all-time great Halloween harbinger, the Headless Horseman, and he's my favorite American monster. But what he also did is created a whole legend and lore in the Hudson Valley region. So Sleepy Hollow was obviously had a lot of energy to it, and it has a lot of history to it, but it didn't really have the the legend and lore that we know now. And thanks to Washington Irving's stories, not only did he write the Legend of Sleepy Hollow, he wrote many other stories that did kind of give more of the mythologies associated with the region. There were create characters that were amalgams of multiple people. So these were real people that were kind of smushed together to create characters in the Legend of Sleepy Hollow and other stories that he wrote for his books, many times under a pseudonym. Washington Irving created, in my opinion, created Santa Claus. He wrote a story about Christmas, and other people agree with this as well. It inspired Charles Dickens, who wrote about the Christmas Carol. I'm like, what did he write? And then also, he inspired multiple people and kind of talked about a character that resembled Saint Nick and was a precursor to what we know was as Santa Claus. All right, so we can go to the next slide. So in the book, there are other spirits that are locations that I did talk about and write about and research in the book. Of course, the big one was the Headless Horseman. And I said, like I said before, there were multiple sightings, but the sightings, they were intensified right after the story was released in the early 1800s. And the Headless Horseman was spotted at least 3 times, we know for sure, but according to reports, the Headless Horseman's been reported usually around the Halloween time. And who is the Headless Horseman? According to the whole backstory, he was a Hessian soldier who was a soldier for hire during the American Revolution. He lost his head in the Battle of White Plains, which is nearby from North Tarrytown, or what was then called North Tarrytown. Uh, there's been multiple reports of who the actual inspiration for the Headless Horseman was. There's several books that have been written about it and kind of going into the real life people that inspired Washington Irving. And also, there are a lot of legends in Ireland and England that probably inspired Washington Irving as well to create the Headless Horseman. But for me, like while writing the book, I was really kind of digging to see, like, revisiting the original story versus what has been sort of perpetuated in pop culture, whether it's a Tim Burton movie or the Disney cartoon. And I strongly view, like, rereading it and looking at sort of what he was intending to do. I'm not necessarily, and I always thought that the Headless Horseman actually was a phantom, like a headless phantom on a horse going to the cemeteries in the wooded area of Sleepy Hollow. But looking at it now and kind of talking to Jonathan Cruck about it, I feel like that perhaps there was a local custom for people that were outsiders to the insular Dutch community in Tarrytown and North Tarrytown to scare off the outsiders. And this, to me, sounds like it perhaps was Brom Bones dressed up as the Headless Horseman and scaring him off. And I always thought it was a ghost. I always assumed it was a ghost, but I had sort of my Scooby Doo aha moment. And I kind of like, you know what, maybe Washington Irving didn't really intend the Headless Horseman to be an actual ghost. But there is a whole backstory to the Headless Horseman, and there have been reports since the writing, and it amplified. I would say about 20, 30 years after he wrote the short story, and they kind of do pop up around Halloween. For those who, the person that has potentially been identified as the Hessian who lost his head in the Battle of White Plains, he actually died on Halloween. So that would explain the correlation with the Headless Horseman and the sightings occurring more frequently around Halloween. And if people that write about the paranormal and myself as an investigator, we find that there's a moment, like they almost like that the ghost has a calendar. So the Headless Horseman appears around Halloween, but also too, I think that because so many people flock to Sleepy Hollow during the season, it almost feeds the monster. It almost feeds the Headless Horseman, and he becomes stronger and stronger every year. So the sightings have continued. I would say that the ones that were reported by Robert Mayhew Bacon in the late 1800s were kind of suspicious. Some of them were, like, for example, there was one guy that was walking what was then the Headless Horseman Bridge, and he was walking from a tavern with a pitcher of beer and walking down the bridge like la la la. Apparently, the Headless Horseman swoops in, pushes him over the bridge, and of course, it makes a book and it becomes a local legend. But he was walking from a tavern with a pitcher of beer. Come on, come on. Perhaps he had a little too much of the ale that was in his pitcher. Who knows? But I think that the Headless Horseman and sort of the story behind it and the mystery behind it is similar to the many of the other alleged spirits that haunt Sleepy Hollow. And there's getting back to the idea of what a thought form is or an egregore, I see this a lot in Salem. These are stories that are told over and over again, and somehow they manifest into a ghost. And I think that when you look at the headless horseman spirit, I wouldn't necessarily say that this was a disembodied spirit of a Hessian soldier looking for a head. I think that it's possibly something, a thought form manifestation that's been created by telling his story, the Headless Horseman story, over and over again, and Ichabod Crane's story over and over again. And for those who want to know more about egregores, there's what's called the Phillips experiment, and this was an experiment that was done where they create a ghost, and you can talk about them and sort of like create a whole backstory to the ghost. And I think that's the case with the Headless Horseman and other spirits that have been reported in Sleepy Hollow. The next one was something that's kind of near and dear to my heart, and I wasn't even going to go there when it comes to investigating the location in Sleepy Hollow Cemetery, but was the Bronze Lady of Sleepy Hollow Cemetery, and that's in the picture there. The Bronze Lady of Sleepy Hollow Cemetery was sort of like the last location that I was going to visit for while writing my book. I went with my good friend April Bousset, who lives right like in New Jersey, right outside of this part of New York. And she and I, I'm like, I want to go check out this legend of the Bronze Lady. And the whole story with the Bronze Lady is that it's a statue in the back of Sleepy Hollow Cemetery. If you those who want to go there, it's close to the recreation of the Headless Horseman Bridge in the back. Very beautiful, picturesque area of the cemetery. But we had a hard time finding it like initially. So we were driving in the cemetery. So I'm not used to actually driving through the cemetery with my friend April. She's like, let's just drive there. And I'm like, okay. So we're driving like a bat out of hell and through the cemetery, looking for this Bronze Lady of the Sleepy Hollow Cemetery. April's a medium, and I also identify as a medium as well. So we were kind of using our abilities to kind of find this Bronze Lady of Sleepy Hollow Cemetery. She kind of pulls in. She's like, it's over there. And so we head over to this mound, and it turns out that's where she was, and she was almost like waiting for us while we walk up to the statue. According to the legend, it was created in the early 1900s for a Civil War general, Samuel Thomas, who died before his wife Mary Thomas. Sorry, it's Ann Thomas. And Ann Thomas wanted a statue to commemorate her husband, who was buried in the mausoleum right across from that statue you see in the photo. So she enlisted a sculptor, an artist who created a likeness to her, but also a statue to commemorate her husband, and almost like gazing over her husband's crypt, which is right across the way. The Bronze Lady, according to legend, if you disrespect the statue, something will happen to you or to your loved ones. And it's sort of an urban legend that's kind of it's gotten more, I guess, sinister over the years. It started off as if you just disrespected her, you would, I don't know, trip and fall, like really minor things would happen. There was one person in the 70s who supposedly disrespected the statue, and the disrespect, whether it could be someone said spitting on the statue, which I don't think anyone ever would really do that. It could be just like not asking permission to take photos of the statue, or just not acknowledging her, just sort of like just being there and not acknowledging the Bronze Lady. So we go in, my friend April, love her, but we were just kind of, she was like taking selfies, and I'm like, April, we got to respect the Bronze Lady according to legend. She's like, oh, whatever. And taking pictures. There's a little peephole in the mausoleum right across the way, and the legend is if you go there, you can actually look in the peephole and see a ghost. And so I look in the peephole and I saw something, and I'm like, April, I think there's something in there. So we were just, I mean, I would say that we were having fun, but we're kind of also checking out the location. But we're in a cemetery, and I think that it's really important when you go to a cemetery to respect the spirits and the people that are buried there. Not to say that we were disrespectful. I just think that maybe we could have been a little bit more respectful to the spirits. So according to the legend, Ann Thomas had the statue commissioned. The statue, as you see there, was created. She didn't like it. She felt like it was very melancholy. It looked like it was, just sad and looking down. And she's like, you know what? Can you create a new face? Because it just doesn't really capture what I'm looking for as a statue to honor my husband's uh, his gravesite. And so the artist reluctantly makes another head for the statue and brings it to Anne Thomas, who says, "Oh, I love this. This is absolutely what I was looking for. Thank you so much." There's a smiley, happy bronze lady. Well, the artist who loved what he created takes the head of the statue and drops it right in front of Anne Thomas, humiliates her, says, "No way, you're going to keep the statue. This is art. You should, accept it and embrace it." And she did not like the statue. So she's actually buried in the mausoleum right where their husband, right across the way. She died in the 1940s, and hence the whole story of the Bronze Lady perpetuating with generally it's like locals and like high school kids and middle school kids who would visit the cemetery late at night and would visit it, and the whole myth associated with the Bronze Lady was perpetuated. Well, anyway, so I go there, and so I carry crystals with me when I go to cemeteries, and I had this crystal here with me that I brought, and I thought when I was leaning over, I thought I dropped it on the ground, and so my friend April, I'm like, "Did I drop this?" And she's like, "I think you did." So I pick it up, put it in my pocket. I go back to the Terrytown House Estate where I was staying again while I was doing the research that weekend, and that's when all hell started breaking loose for me. So I that night I couldn't sleep. I walked out of the Terrytown House Estate and saw what looked like a woman wearing a white dress running from the Biddle Mansion, kind of coming toward me, and I'm like, "What is going on?" I heard a woman almost screaming or like kind of like calling me, like, "Sam, come here, come here." And I go outside and I check it out, and then I kind of rub my eyes and she disappears. Then I go back home with the rock that I found at the cemetery, but it turns out my rock was already here. So I picked up a rock, apparently was dropped by somebody else, and it looked just like my rose quartz crystal that I always bring with me. So I brought a rock that belonged to the Bronze Lady, and I brought it home. I'm sitting at an antique desk in my apartment. I goes a month. I had, I guess, like really bad luck. After that, it was kind of like one thing after another that at the time I didn't really attribute it to our visit to the Bronze Lady, but then something happened that kind of rocked my world upside down. The apartment above mine there was a moped fire. Someone brought their moped into their apartment. It catches on fire. It sets off all the sprinklers in the system, and then all the sprinklers go down and destroy everything in my apartment. So I lost years and years of research, including research on the ghost of Sleepy Hollow and all my research on Salem and Lizzie Borden and all the things that I've written about for the 18 books previously. And I was displaced for 3 weeks, and my life turned upside down. I go back into my destroyed apartment to retrieve the belongings that I could have. The only thing that was not touched was the rock that I accidentally took from the Sleepy Hollow Cemetery and the desk, the writing desk where I write my books. And my computer was saved, which thank goodness. And some of my research was saved, but for the most part, everything was destroyed. So thinking that perhaps that I somehow upset the Bronze Lady with my friend April. I'm like, "April, we have to go back and we have to make amends to the Bronze Lady." So April and I, and to add to it, I was writing this section on the Bronze Lady while the fire took place, which is even more creepy for me. And also my friend April, who lives in New Jersey. Didn't have a fire, but she had a storm happen in New Jersey. A tree falls on her roof and pierces her roof. There's a hole that's right above her desk and her like workspace as well, and the water was like kind of going right down to her desk. So we both are convinced that the Bronze Lady is upset at us, and we want to make amends to her. So we go back to I fly back to New York and then stay at the Terrytown House Estate again, and then we make an amends to her. I bring back the rock that I accidentally took from the cemetery. And by the way, never take anything, even if on accident. Really, just don't take anything, even if you think you dropped something from a cemetery or especially from a cursed part of the area. And looking at like going back and kind of revisiting the cemetery and the lady in the bronze lady, I feel like that we couldn't find her the second time. So we were driving around. The first time she kind of almost guided us there. This time she was evading us, and kept going in circles around the areas that we went to before, only a month before. And so we were driving around, and then we finally found her after doing like searches and just kind of retracing our steps from the month prior. We go back, I bring back the rock, I do what I call an apology ritual, and looking at the location, it's kind of interesting because there's two pine trees on either side of the bronze lady. You can kind of see that in the photo, and you it's almost like it's a portal of some sort. And people reported seeing that the bronze lady, she cries. People reported seeing blood coming from her eyes, all sorts of things. And I'm like, even though I'm not a big believer in like cemeteries being haunted and also cursed statues in cemeteries, and I thought that this legend was just hocus pocus, just urban legend. But there's something happened, and whether or not it was other people perpetuating this urban legend, or it's I somehow activated the bronze lady of Sleepy Hollow Cemetery. I'm not sure. I just wanted to make amends, so we apologized to her. I did feel a shift on the land and the property, almost like she accepted our apology, and I did return the rock. And my life went back, and what we got from the whole experience was, even though she kind of turned my life upside down, it was almost a blessing in disguise. So even though I did lose everything, I did get a new apartment pretty quickly. I had a lot of clutter. I had thousands and thousands of books of research and just papers everywhere, and I was able to unfortunately get rid of most of it, but a lot of that was digitized. So I do have a lot of copies and didn't have to really start from scratch. So it was, in a kind of a tumultuous way, it was almost a blessing in disguise. So don't upset the bronze lady. Don't disrespect her. Ask her permission. I have other friends who have gone there since and before, and they've had experiences where they try to take a picture, and then the picture starts to distort, or kind of like there's like a tweaking to the picture, and then they ask for her permission, and then it records perfectly. So there's something there. Whether or not it's actually Ann Thomas's spirit that's haunting it, I don't think so. I think it may be something else. It could be like kids creating an egregore, creating an energy at that statue, at that location, that somehow interacts with people and potentially curses them. So the book also goes into the other spirits that were alluded to in the Legend of Sleepy Hollow, but also in Edward Mayhew Bacon's book, the Chronicles of Tarrytown, the Raven Rock's Lady in White, and there's three different versions of the Lady in White, and you'll find all over the country, but also especially in Sleepy Hollow and Tarrytown in the Hudson Valley, that there are a lot of like ladies in whites, ladies in blues, bronze ladies, a lot of colorful ladies in that area. And I kind of took a deep dive into what that means, and I talked to several experts in the field when it comes to sort of like the metaphor of a ghost, including co-author of A Haunted History of Invisible Women, Leanna Renee Hebert, who's amazing, absolutely love her, Alex Matsuo, who wrote Women in the Paranormal. And we really want to kind of take a deep dive in what do these colorful women represent. And there's a lot of misogyny, obviously, and it's sort of like reflection of the times, but it's also the colors did represent different aspects, like the woman in white. It could be like a woman in her wedding gown. It could be sort of like the virginal woman, or the woman in blue could represent something else. So the colors are significant to the different colors, but the biggest thing is it doesn't give the women a name. They're just kind of like colorful figures that are nameless without a voice. And it was really my passion to give those women women a voice. And the lady in white in Raven Rock is a story that's been told for hundreds of years, and it's almost like it's an archetype of some sorts, and also like a harbinger crisis apparition. The one of the stories dates back to Native Americans. She was being pursued by a Native American man, or it could have been a colonist who was trying to sexually assault her, and she jumps off the rock and commits suicide to avoid the attack. And that's one story of the lady in white at Raven Rock. The second one is a woman who was a colonist. She gets lost in the woods. And if you try to make the trek out there, by the way, it's very difficult to find. And I try to take a shortcut, and I don't don't look at Google Maps to plot out your adventure in Sleepy Hollow. Just follow the blog reports, and there are several maps to show you how to get there. So I try to get out there, and almost got stuck out there. And this woman, apparently she'll wail to warn people that it's dangerous out there, not to get lost, especially in a snowstorm. And the other was a more of an American Revolution era story of a woman who goes with her lover, who was a soldier, probably, I think it's a Hessian soldier, so it was kind of like a Romeo and Juliet story, and they commit suicide at the Rock. So there's all these different legends, and they reflect the different times and the different periods of the era. But again, all the women, they're just sort of like caricatures, and not necessarily well thought out or well hashed out women with backstories. And that to me is sort of like a misogynistic approach to ghost lore. And I think it's really important for us to look, when we write these books, to not only focus on the rich white guys that are typical ghosts that haunt these locations throughout the country, but also look at the women and the people of color who also lived and potentially lived there in the afterlife, and to give them a voice. And speaking of people that are marginalized, the others, Huldah the Witch. And Huldah the Witch was mentioned and are alluded to in the Legend of Sleepy Hollow, but Bacon also did talk about her and almost created this whole story, to the point where there's a festival dedicated to Huldah the Witch. And her story is that she lived during the American Revolution. She lived in the woods near what was Sleepy Hollow Cemetery, and the British were coming in, taking over the land. She turns into Xena, the warrior princess, and goes and attacks all the British soldiers and protects her land. And she's this superwoman who was trying to reach out to the community, but she was ostracized because she was labeled a witch and she lived in the woods. And so the thing is with Huldah the Witch, she didn't exist, and that part. I mean, a lot of people, when I say that, they're like no, because they love Huldah the Witch. In fact, there's a whole gravestone at the old Dutch church, the burying ground, dedicated to Huldah. There's a festival dedicated to her, and someone that writes and lives right outside of Salem, Massachusetts. There were women like that who were kind of viewed as witches, were outcast from society. So she is sort of an amalgam of many women that did exist. But Huldah the Witch, the Bohemian, who supposedly haunts the area of Sleepy Hollow, unfortunately did not exist. But I do feel like that the story is well, first of all, the story is so over the top. Like, she's kind of taken superhero status, but I do think that it's a legend, and I think it's important for us to view what's real and what's not real. And people report, potentially seeing what could be Huldah's ghost, and I'm like, guys, she didn't exist, so why would her ghost be haunting the cemetery? But people create ghosts, and they do it maybe intentionally and unintentionally. Another ghost that I wrote about and really spent a lot of time kind of investigating was John Andre's ghost, and he was the spy who was hanged in Tappan, New York. Uh, Patriots Park is where he supposedly haunts the location, and you can that's been reported for many years. And also, I went to this lovely restaurant called the Old 76 House, and right outside of where he was kept as where he was executed, where he was hanged, but also where he was kept as prisoner. And it's, to me, that if you're going to go to that area, you got to stop by the Old 76 House and just check it out. Have brunch, have dinner there, because you can still feel his energy at that location. And so John Andre's ghost supposedly haunts multiple locations, but to me, the one, if I could choose a location where I think he would still be lingering in the afterlife, it probably would be the Old 76 House. We talked about Tarrytown House Estate. It's a rolling mansion. King House, which is a mansion, and there's the Biddle Mansion, which is right across the way, and that's where they have breakfast. And there's multiple hotel rooms kind of built around on this property. And contrary to what I thought, it's a sprawling property with a lot of land. And you need a car or take an Uber. Don't ever try to walk to head out to other locations nearby. But it is really close to the Lyndhurst Mansion, and it's close to Sunnyside, which is right down the street. But again, don't drive there. Don't walk there. Also at that location is Goose Feather, which is an amazing Asian fusion restaurant that's located in the downstairs of the King Mansion. And I spent many, many nights at Tarrytown House Estate, also in the King Mansion. So I did see a woman in white when I was staying there. So perhaps it was Sybil, but this woman I think had some ties to the Bronze Lady, or maybe it was she was active. I'm still not sure what I saw or who it was, but there is a ghost, and she also wears white as well. And then we talked extensively about the Bronze Lady of Sleepy Hollow Cemetery, but she is someone, if you do go visit, just respect her. If you do take her picture, ask her permission, and take it for real. Anne Thomas was a real woman. Her husband Samuel Thomas was a real man, and he was a general, and he was someone that should be respected. Not to say that I didn't disrespect him, but I wish I would have maybe paid more respect than I did initially. All right, so if we can go to the next slide. So in the book Ghost of Sleepy Hollow, and I hope everybody gets a copy of this book. To me, it's so much fun to read, and the part that makes me happy the most is this map that was created by Jonathan Crooks Research. And hold on, my book here, Ghost of Sleepy Hollow. But in the book is the map, and this map was a recreation of Jonathan Crooks Research. So it goes into Ichabod Crane's race, and if you follow this map, a lot of the locations featured in my book, Ghost of Sleepy Hollow, are actually featured in this map, and a lot of the haunts in the Hudson Valley. So I just love the map, and I love the way that it kind of taps into recreates the fictional Ichabod Crane's race, but it also kind of makes it accessible for people and points out the real life locations with ties to Sleepy Hollow. So Robert, if you can go to the next slide, I'm not sure what I have on the next slide. So we're getting close to the tail end of this discussion, but I just want to talk a little bit about the types of hauntings that I encountered, not only in Sleepy Hollow, but throughout the many locations that I've investigated throughout the years. So there are residual hauntings, and I get a lot of residual hauntings in Boston. There's American Revolutionary battles, soldier spirits. They kind of repeat like a videotape replay over and over again, and they don't respond to you. If they do, they would be called intelligent spirits. Then there's poltergeists, which are hyped up intelligent entities, shadow entities, and then also the D word. And Robert, we can go to the next one too. Can we go to the next slide, Robert? Sorry. Oh, there we go. So paranormal monsters, and I think that a lot of what's going on in Sleepy Hollow are these almost created ghosts or created monsters, thanks to the brilliant imagination of Washington Irving, but also the people over the years who have perpetuated the stories and created this enclave of this amazing place to go to during the Halloween season. So paranormal monsters, and I put them in quotes because they're really not monsters; they're maybe like misunderstood uh, spirits or energies. So the monsters are earthbound spirits that take on a monstrous form. So, in other words, a spirit that maybe had unfinished business is sticking around the afterlife, and they are they look like a monster, but they're not technically a monster, like in the traditional sense. Psychological imprints or splinter manifestations. So I've done a lot of like Salem, also Lizzie Borden House. A lot of times, like if there's like a tragedy like the American Revolution, like a death or like a suicide, it's potentially that's gonna psychically imprint itself on the land. Uh, and I'm an idea that maybe it's like a splinter of the person, so it's not their disembodied soul. It's almost like a piece of their energy is like implanted at the location, and that's the idea, kind of like the stone tape theory idea that somehow there's an imprint there and you go there, psychic mediums can pick up on that psychic imprint, but it's not their soul like that's stuck there. It's just like piece of their energy, their essence, and maybe even the trauma that has kind of implanted itself on the land. And a lot of what you get from a sensitive perspective, from a psychic medium perspective at Sleepy Hollow is just that. It's like American Revolutionary War history, Native American history as well. That's sort of psychically imprinted itself there, and I think there's still a lot to be discovered. I think that it's much like Salem. When I first started writing about Salem, there wasn't a lot about the ghost of Salem, and now it's pretty much my bestseller. Everyone's has gone there looking for the spirits, and I think that Sleepy Hollow is about 10 years behind when it comes to Salem, when it comes to becoming a major tourist destination. But do we want it to become like Salem? Do we want it to be its own authentic Halloween experience, which I love? And a part of me doesn't want it to change. I want it to kind of stay how it is now. And I also feel that the ghosts are, they're happy there. Like the energy, I feel when I go to Sleepy Hollow, I don't feel the guilt that I feel going to Salem. So I don't know. That's up for debate. I do think that change is inevitable, and I do think that the Sleepy Hollow and Tarrytown are starting to embrace the idea of the. I mean, everything's branded Headless Horseman. You can't turn a corner in the area without seeing a statue dedicated to Washington Irving or something talking about the legend of Sleepy Hollow. So it is pretty much part of the fabric of the land, but I also think that there's still like kind of old school Halloween aesthetic and vibe to it that I hold near and dear to my heart. Uh, we talked a lot about thought forms or egregores that we've created ourselves, and I think a lot of what's going on in Sleepy Hollow at the locations that I visited are just that, thought forms, egregores. There's the idea of interdimensional, and we talked about the bronze lady of Sleepy Hollow Cemetery, and the two pine trees, and it's almost like a portal to the other side. So there could be like almost something coming in and out of that portal that took the shape of the bronze lady of Sleepy Hollow Cemetery. And then elemental entities, and those are, I could write a whole book about them. Those are fairies or elementals, puckwudgies in New England. They are gnomes, other elemental creatures. There's like a tree big monster, and there's also, I'm not going to say some of the names because if you say their names, supposedly it's really bad, but like the W and shapeshifters and that sort of thing. So I think for tonight, since we're running out of time, I just wanted to close up. I just want to say that writing Ghost of Sleepy Hollow really was a dream come true for me. Going back to the locations that I used to go to while I lived in New York City during Halloween and revisiting them as a paranormal investigator and as an author who writes about it was amazing. I think going on Halloween, like that last weekend when everything there's parades and all the fanfare was what I have been looking for in Salem for many years. And not to say that Salem is not fun to go to. I just say going to Salem in October, it's so crowded and become so commercialized that I would recommend, without a heartbeat, I would recommend Sleepy Hollow for Halloween. And I would save Salem for off season, like the summer or even November, December. It's a great time to go to Salem. So now we're going to open it up to any questions or comments. And thank you so much for having me back. This has been great being able to share my experience with Sleepy Hollow.
So, folks, let's give Sam a big virtual round of applause for a job well done. And let's take approximately 10 minutes of questions from the audience. Looks like we already have 4 or 5 questions. So, Ralph says, I believe in spiritual contact and find your experiences very interesting. Have you ever had any spirit contact you in a dream?
Yeah, I mean, getting to like what we just talked about. So dreams are a very big part of my skill set when it comes to spirit communication. I really, when I was in college, I actually I studied lucid dreaming. So lucid dreaming is really as someone that's creative. And then what's happened is I'll have like loved ones come and visit me in my dreams. And the bronze lady, for example, she was visiting me in my dreams regularly or throughout that whole month that I first visited the statue and to the very last part, especially at the when I was at the Tarrytown House to stay the night that I took the rock from the cemetery. I never do that, by the way. She came to me in my dream first, and then I woke up and then I walked outside. So yes, dreams are absolutely, in my opinion, the safest way for the spirits to communicate with you. And then when you work the muscle, you'll be able to do it outside of dreams. But for me, the first the dreams were my first spirit communication. Like that's when they came because I was in a state where I felt safe. I I didn't know. I mean, you can't control your dreams, so I was able to communicate and not be terrified. And then if I did say if I did see the bronze lady in real life, I probably would have been really scared as a kid. So yes, dreams are are a way for spirit communication. And if you want to take it a step further, you can work the muscle and communicate with spirits outside of your dreams.
So Paul writes, I've never been to Sleepy Hollow. Is there a good map to follow to visit all the famous locations, or should I just use Google?
I well, that's what there's a map in the book, and I really hope you look at that. I mean, it's kind of like a treasure map that we would do as kids. So it's not necessarily like a Google map, but yeah, I would use my book as a resource. I
Good
go to,
answer, Sam. Good answer.
use my book as a resource, and like I spend a lot of time going to all these locations that are haunted, but also too there's a lot of historical locations that people go to Sleepy Hollow and they don't know where to go. Salem, it's kind of like spelled out for you. You have to look for the locations and use my book as a resource.
An anonymous attendee says, "Do you think egregores are can originate from modern horror stories as well? For example, from modern urban legends or modern horror films?"
Absolutely. So, like Slender Man is a perfect example. Creepypasta was all the kids were reading it and almost created a monster, an egregore. Slender Man didn't exist, and then it became very real to many people to the point where it led to multiple sightings and attacks as well. So, Slender Man is a great example. Another example of egregore, the lady in the blue dress in Salem, is something that we tell that story on our ghost tours over and over again. She actually never existed. And so egregores can be, and another thing too, clowns. I'm terrified of clowns, but there's like killer clowns and it and all that. I mean, part of me is like, did we do? There have been like random clown sightings, and people are like, is that a person or is that like an entity taking the shape of a clown? So yeah, I think so.
Judy says, this was very interesting. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Annie says, hi, Sam, four exclamation points. I love seeing you so excited and passionate about your new book. Which was more exciting and enjoyable to write about, Salem or Sleepy Hollow?
So Annie's part of my group. I have a group called Spirit Squad, and that's for people that are sensitives that want to hone in on their skills. But I would say so. Salem was a lot of fun. So Salem was a lot of information and it was a lot of guilt. So Salem to me was important to write. I think that there wasn't really a great ghost book on Salem. I was one of the first ghost books on Salem. So getting the history correct was really important to me. Sleepy Hollow, it was the ghosts were harder to find and the ghost lore was harder to find, but there was less guilt in Sleepy Hollow. So I would say Sleepy Hollow was more fun to write. And the adventures that I had with my friend April and my friend Angela, who took a lot of the photos, that was just so amazing. So I would say that Sleepy Hollow was more fun to write. I think that Salem may be more important from a historical perspective, but Sleepy Hollow is right up there. I would say number two as far as books that I find out of all the books that I've written, probably the one that I would recommend for everybody to read.
So, Sam, we're coming up on 8 o'clock. I guess I'll ask the last question. What project are you working on next? I know Halloween is your busy season, obviously, but do you have any documentaries or TV shows or books in the pipeline?
Yeah, so I just got a contract today, and really good question. So getting back to Salem, I've written two books on Salem: Ghost of Salem and Wicked Salem. I was on a show called History's Most Haunted, and it aired in Canada. And I had a stalker in Salem, and that's been other presentations that I did for the Tewksbury Library. So I've been afraid to go back to Salem. There was something there that wore a hat that was stalking me. But what they found in the investigation is that the spirits want me to come back, and so I'm going to reinvest myself in Salem in 2025. And I just got a book deal for book number 3 on Salem, but I'm going to focus on Salem Village. So it's going to be not just uh, Salem, the one that Salem that we know, but the Danvers, Topsfield, Peabody, all the areas outside that were considered Salem in 1692.
Excellent. And Jay did get a last minute question in. Jay wants to know, can you recommend any specific ghost tours in the Boston area?
Well, I gave ghost tours in Boston. I actually have my own company there called Boston Haunts. I started out with a group called Haunted Boston, and they're still going on in Boston. I would recommend them. I don't know the tour guides currently, but I do know the tour owner, so I would say Haunted Boston.
And with that, Sam, we've reached 8 o'clock. Do you have any last words for the audience before we wrap it up?
I will say,
By the way, Sam, where can folks find your book?
so right now, because it's a new book, it came out in the late of September. It's really difficult to find in bookstores. So I highly recommend getting a copy of Ghost of Sleepy Hollow on Amazon. And for now, and I will tell you, based on the amount of sales that we've had so far, I think that we possibly will sell out. So what you want to do, especially if you want to get a copy before spooky season, to order that copy on Amazon, and then eventually it will be in all the bookstores, especially in the Sleepy Hollow Tarrytown region.
Great. So, folks, let's give Sam one last big virtual round of applause. Look for an email from me tomorrow with a link to this recording, as well as information about some other upcoming paranormal programs that might be of interest. And remember, for those watching live, when you exit the Zoom in a moment, please take the feedback survey. So thanks, Sam. Great job as always. Your mother would be proud. And I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their night. Thanks again. Goodbye, Sam. We'll see you next October.
All right, see you, Robert.